Thank you very much. To be honest, after the last session, I could actually ditch this and actually talk about a whole heap of other things raised from those questions as well. I was here 2 years ago talking to, well, not here, but I was at the last conference 2 years ago talking about the imminent changes that GDPR is going to bring. Now, a lot of organisations have been talking about, oh, it's 1 year on from GDPR. Look, GDPR had actually been around for 2 years before the actual, the enforcement came in place. So actually it's 3 years old. Data protection itself is a lot older than that. So what we're talking about isn't really stuff that's new. It's better codified, it's better worded, there's more legal pressure to do certain things. So I'm looking at this from a 2 years on perspective from the last time I spoke to you. And when I'm thinking about it, I'm going, okay, right, we have had nightmare scenarios. Okay? Those are all things. We've basically loss of essential services, KFC, they ran out of chicken. But when we look at these, we go, hey, guess what? All of those nightmare scenarios, none of them to do with GDPR. What's the worst thing that's happened with GDPR? Actually, I can't think of anything. I honestly can't think of something that's been completely disastrous because GDPR said you can't do that, because actually GDPR rarely says you can't do things. So when we look at all the things around the world and when you get data protection experts together to say, how are we doing? Is this right? Is that right? Do you know what the most common phrase they come up with is? It's almost to the point where if you speak to the ICO helpline, it is one of the first things they say. Rumour has it that somebody's actually going to make them a batch of t-shirts that has it all over the chest. So instead of the ICO enforcement jackets, it will just say this on instead. Can anyone think of a phrase that is most likely to come out of a data protection or privacy expert's mouth? It depends. Pretty much everything that we look at, that we talk about within the schools, what we're going to do, are we doing it right? That is pretty much all the answer. And why is that? Can anybody think, why are we always going to say it depends? Because GDPR is risk-based. The whole approach is risk-based. Are we doing the right things? Well, it's going to be different in one scenario than it is to a different scenario. So we have to think about these things. Now, when we think about how we approach GDPR, and we said, okay, this is what you've got to do, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and there's lots of models that people were coming up with. And I look back at the stream from 2 years ago, and I'm thinking, did I really say that? Because actually, as more guidance has come out, as there's been some clarifications from the European Data Protection Board, as ICO has turned around and said certain things, as things have happened in other supervisory authorities across Europe, we're able to start turning around and saying, well, actually, yeah, let's just get back to basics a little bit, because, let's think, oh, well, we've got those 12 steps, those initial 12 steps. And actually, let's have a think about what we should have been doing or have in place by now. Okay, just a quick hands in the air, and I know I'm going to do some horrible audience participation things, okay? Can you all stick your hands in the air? Come on, everybody. Don't make me turn the camera around. Okay. Who here has read all of the ICO 12 steps? Put your hand down if you've read it all. If you've read it all. Okay? Well, being honest, it's not difficult to read through, okay? I would suggest you really, really do have a look through. It's 20 minutes of your time. Now, I know I gave it to one of the governors in my school and said, go and have a look. It took them about 20 minutes. You really need to just go and have a look. It gives you a good basis of things. But, these are summary headings that we've got from them. So how many of these have we all done? Okay, hands up again. After things that are on the board, who would say that they've covered all of these actions? Hands down if you've covered everything. There's always one smart person, isn't there? Okay, well, looking at awareness. Now, we know staff need training. That's one of the requirements. We know that they need constant reminders. We know that there's a tried and tested method of sticking posters everywhere, and eventually it will sink into them, almost like osmosis. We all poached the password posters from Smooth Walls all those years ago. I bet we're still at Olympia, you know, and we plastered them in places. And it started to sink in a little bit, okay? We needed a bit more. So we know that having the right information plastered up in places helps. We also know that training is required, and we need to keep a record of that training. Then we've got the next bit, so the information, the communication, privacy notices. Again, hands up everybody please. Okay, keep your hands up if you adjusted your privacy notice for GDPR Day. Okay, so because of GDPR you adjusted your privacy notice. Keep up, keep up, keep up. Okay. Not having one in the first place and creating one is pretty much the same thing. Okay, put your hands down if you have since then updated it. That's brilliant actually, that's really, really good. Usually when I ask that question it's a case of, well actually people haven't. Privacy notices are living documents. As you make changes you will have to update them. That's one of the facts of life. People don't like to update things on websites because it's a bit of a rigmarole, but privacy notices is one of those ones you will have to constantly do. Okay, so knowing what information you've got, how many of you have seen the, or watched the data ecosystem video chat that Ian from the DFE did many moons ago now? Okay, it talked about an ecosystem. It's looking at what you've got. What is processing data? So what we say to schools is, go and have a look, pass this form around, get people to fill it in. What are they doing? It gives you a chance to bring everything back later and actually work out, actually that's not using personal data, that's just a website resource. Because sometimes people don't know, don't understand. One of the other side effects is, you can share this information back out to your key staff and to your middle leaders, to heads of the department, and say, well, this is what's being used. Some of them might turn around and go, I didn't know you had licenses for that. The fact that we didn't know you had licenses for that in the first place either until we did this exercise is a different, different issue. But sharing around what is available for people to use is a good thing. One of the things that we found is that some schools like this because it's been able to get rid of some duplication. And we're talking about finance earlier, being able to go to the business manager and say, guess what, we're paying too much money, get the heads of the department to argue about which of these tools they want, okay, is a good thing. But it might be that you've got different tools for different reasons, and there's educational benefits of using one against another. And that allows for some work between departments. I mean, there should be some work between departments because of, or between subjects because of things like STEM or STEAM. So I do prefer STEAM, arts has got to be in there. But actually we haven't seen it in a really consolidated way since ICT across the curriculum. And I apologise for saying ICT instead of computer studies, but I still think ICT across the curriculum is a good thing. We're then looking at, now you know what you've got, and you're looking at, are you allowed to do anything with it? So the lawful bases. There's not really much to say about those. Most of you see that so many times. The fact that, if you're doing special category, you need something from those 6 and also something from Article 9. I'm not going to read out Article 9, I don't want to put you to sleep. Anyone mentioning about the need for security, appropriate security measures, that's Article 5, if anybody needs to ask you. So, interesting one about public task, actually. So, a number of us have said over the years public interest, because that's what it says, a task in public interest. But when you look at the ICO website, they say public task as a heading. we wondered about that, and we did chat with them and asked them, you know, what's the thinking around it, and eventually we got the message back to say, well, actually, public task covers more, because it's not just a task in the public interest, it's also using vested authority. So it's where somebody is required to do something. Now, schools don't like using legal obligations as a reason because they're not too sure of the law, and it's one of those things where they're not quite sure whether they should do it that way. But actually, all statutory guidance, everything that comes out through the DFE, schools have got an official authority to do those things, and so public task becomes even more embedded. So we've had to turn around and go, actually, yeah, over the next 6 months, we're going to be moving all of our stuff away from saying public interest and start to say public task. So that's one of the things you might want to think about when you're having conversations in schools. Now, one of those ones up there is consent, and it needs a bit of a special mention. People talk about it being the gold standard, and the reason why they say that is because if you have consent and it is done properly, it means that you know exactly what it is being used for. How many people, hands up again, sorry, are using consent as a lawful basis within schools for anything, absolutely anything? Okay? Yes, consent can be an appropriate lawful basis. Can be. Who is using it for the bulk of what the school does? One. You do still get this. And that's because schools aren't fully clued up, or even if some people are, people further up the chain are saying, oh, actually, no, this is the way that we've been told to do it. Consent can be withdrawn. Let's think about the other things about consent. Freely given. Yes, I'm going to take the register in the morning. Do I have your consent to mark you down as present? No. Specific. You've got to make sure you've got consent for every single thing you do. Yeah, that's going to be fun, all of those consent forms. Informed. Yeah, because you're really going to spend all that time explaining every single time you're getting consent for absolutely everything to every parent, every 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old. Interesting one, when they get to 18, they're an adult. You've still got legal requirements about what you do, but because they're an adult, they can afford consent themselves. That's really going to muck things up for schools, isn't it? Unambiguous. How many know? How many have seen really unambiguous consent forms? They're a rarity. They really are. Someone mentions consent, and that's what I think about it, to be honest. So, right, breaches. Okay, quickly go on to the breaches. Hands up again. Sorry. Put your hand down if you had a breach in the last 12 months. Okay. If you've not had a breach in the last 12 months, that's not 12 months good behaviour, that's 12 months not caught. Okay. How many, hands up again. How many people have been hit by the phishing scam that's going around schools? Put your hands down if you've been hit. Okay. How many of you said you haven't had a breach? It's a breach. If you've been hit by the phishing scam, if one of your staff has logged in, passed on their credentials, it's a breach. It may not be a reportable one, but you've still got to log in. You've still got to explain what you're going to do, and all of the advice and guidance that's on EduGeek and in other places is a really good thing to look at and follow. So, looking at some info from ICO. Nearly, well, yeah, 11,468 data breaches in those. 1,511 within education. That's the third highest. Okay. Now these are cases that have been reported and subsequently closed. How many of those cases within education had action or sanctions? 0. There hasn't been any sanction against a school now for 5 years? I think it's 5 years now, it's either 5 or 6 years. Okay? I'll talk about what ICO are going to be pressing on soon in a minute. Okay, 12 steps. You get asked about children. Do you do stuff about children? And I think we all do, don't we? One of the interesting things is Internet Society Services. So there's still discussion around, okay, we use Internet Society Services in schools. Oh, we need to get consent because they're over 13 and all those bits and pieces. Well, ICO turned around and said, Internet Society Services when the provider is dealing directly with the data subject. The school is the data controller, so it's been done through the school, so in which case it's not considered an Internet Society service. However, there is the age-appropriate design code that's been gone through in consultation, and I could rant the whole day just about with that, because it all talks about Internet Society service providers who do things for schools purely as being the data controller. They've forgotten schools exist. Can you think, as a company that goes, right, I've got this tool, I've got this service that I'm going to make children use, I want them to use it. Oh, it's also being used by a school. Which one do you think they're going to put the effort into all of the design and say this is how the model about how we're going to work? Is it going to be the school-based one, which they probably give away for free? Or is it going to be the one they get the money for? If you get a chance to have a look at the age-appropriate design code, have a read through, see where you think it may affect you as a school, your children, you as a governor, you as a parent, and put a response in. Yes, children, vulnerable data subjects, affects almost all areas of school. Okay, DPOs. Hands up again, I'm afraid. I know, sorry, I'm getting tired. Use your other hand if your one's getting tired. How many of you were asked to be a DPO? Keep your hands up if you're asked to be a DPO. How many of those people are DPOs? Yay! Last time I said this 2 years ago, 2 people kept their hands up. And I felt so sorry for them. Thankfully, they were doing changes of jobs, so it actually worked. How many people here, stick your hands up for this one, are concerned that their DPO has got a conflict of interest? Keep your hands up if you think there is a concern. Okay, that's worrying. Yeah? Now it could be because they've got financial control where they're making choices, they've got choices around technology, they've got choices about which data is being processed and why. And this is a bit of an issue. Okay? Freedom of information request to ICO, that's how many educational settings have paid the fee. That's across the UK. So if you take 24,000 odd in England, 2,000-ish in Wales, so 780 in Scotland, and about 1,600 in Northern Ireland because of the way they do things. That's not a lot. That's how many have registered their DPO. Now, taking into account, we do know that we have schools that are buying into LA services, that are buying into managed DPO services. So we do know that that happens, but every school has still got to register. If they're an academy, it's done through the Academy Trust, but the Academy Trust has to name the schools in their also trading as list. That's what they should be doing. So we should see a lot more. And that, we still have schools that are saying the DPO is voluntary. These are state schools, maintained schools and academies. Okay? This is what ICO is going to be going on to. Yeah? Speaking with the registration team at the Data Protection Practitioners Conference at the beginning of April, and they said, yes, it is a problem. Yes, they want to get more information out to schools. He said, yes, I'll mention it here, we'll mention it wherever we possibly can. They said, we're only a small team, don't get too many at once, please. But it does need to be done. When you go back, you'll get lots of advice about doing lots of things from lots of vendors here and lots of speakers. One of the things I'd say is, if nothing else from this, go back, check your school is registered, has paid the registration fee. Check your school's DPO is registered as well. Okay? If you just do those 2 things, it will make a world of difference. Because if something goes wrong and someone knocks on your door and you've not even done that basic thing, then yes, you are more likely to have action taken against you, as well as the reputational damage. DPIAs. Okay, what's the difference between a DPIA and a PIA? There may be a prize for whoever gets it right. No? Okay. To be honest, it's virtually none. A privacy impact assessment, it's a risk assessment. We all do lots of risk assessments in school. We're hoping to drive risk assessments to be second nature. Hey, works for health and safety, doesn't it? Teacher walks into a classroom, it's flooded, they know it's a problem. Teacher walks into a classroom and there's a group of children building a pyramid out of chairs to see who can climb and touch the ceiling. I like using that example because that's one of the things that I did as a kid. So, you know, it's a case of they know it's a problem. It should be common sense. I'm going to bring in new software. Do I need to check it first? It should be as simple as that. I want to share some information. Am I allowed to do so? Common sense stuff. It shouldn't be necessarily, oh God, yes, it's going to take ages to do this. We know that there are certain risk assessments that need to be done because there is high risk. And where there is high risk or it's large scale, not likely to apply to schools, may do to local authorities or to the larger academy trusts. But where there's special category data, where there's vulnerable children, looked after children or former looked after children, ones with specific medical issues, if their data is being used within all of that, then that's when you do your DPIA. DPIA is a specific term within GDPR for when it's needed to be done. ICO have got a template. We've broken it down a little bit more. There's actually work being done with DFE, with the stakeholder group. So the same way that the DFE's toolkit was run through a stakeholder group, and there's another group that's put together. There's some of the members here who are on it as well. And it's a case of we're trying to put together some standardized risk assessments, some things to start giving you more of the questions that you need. Now, it might be that some go, right, let's build it through a workflow. Let's actually look to see what's happening. Let's ask the questions around here. Now, there are risks associated with operational IT as well. And I've spoken with Chris and with Rick about actually asking a couple of you to come together to talk about those, possibly with some of the vendors you use as well, to say, this is what we need to do to cover, okay, how do we build our Active Directory? How do we actually build our radius authentication or whatever within our wireless network? It's looking at those things. It's looking at making sure that you're taking appropriate actions and measures for you as you're delivering the IT service. Because let's face it, okay, hands up again. Who has got domain or very high privilege rights to pretty much everything? Yeah? You are all a risk because you can access anything and everything. If your accounts are compromised, the school is compromised. Okay, so yes, there will be volunteers wanted. More information will be put on EduGeek beginning of next week to actually draw people in, to actually start doing some work around that. So we've gone through all of that and we've said, okay, well, what's changed then in the last 2 years? Yeah, very little, actually. In the same way that 10 years ago, when Bex put their advice out, that and GDPR, there wasn't that much of a change. It was more codified, as I said. So, but what are we doing now? We're trying to establish that mature position. We should have done the majority of those areas within the 12 steps. We need to make sure that whatever we're doing within processes and documentation, anybody who reads me on EduGeek knows that I ranted for years about making sure that network managers and technical staff do documentation, because people need to be replaceable. If you have information in your head about where things are, how things are being used, and it ain't down on paper, you're not doing the school service, okay? You need to make sure that you are, to some extent, with regards to your knowledge, replaceable. Look for the gaps. So, in those 12 steps, what's one of the things that I didn't mention that we hear about a lot? So, again, hands in the air, please, everybody. Who here has been involved in anything related to Cyber Essentials? Hands stay up if you have. Okay, that's good to see. That's really good to see. Why do we do Cyber Essentials? Assurance. Okay, it's a form of assurance. It means that we're gathering evidence. Okay, there's an audit cycle. It's a life cycle. It doesn't have a start and an end. It keeps going round. The whole idea is to find out where are the gaps and how do we fill them. An audit is a way of collecting your evidence, to actually being able to sift through and find out what your next steps are. Lots of models for doing this sort of thing. Plan, do, check, act will be one that a lot of folk will be aware of. Okay, but it's about having that audit cycle. It's about making sure that you're covering everything. And you know, we have this up here, and we've got some other variations of this document. What we tend to say is, this is a guide. This isn't that you have to do it this way. If you want to take a snapshot of your infrastructure and actually work on that, if you want to have a look at staff weaknesses first, and have a look at that. If you want to have a look at your suppliers and data labs and data share groups first, have a look at that. It's all around what fits you as a school. You've got to continue to drive awareness. And yes, that means having fresh things to stick up all the time. But it's looking at targeting it now. You've already done the big drive, you've already done the big training. You know you're going to have more training next year because you want to do it as an annual thing. But hey, having one 30-minute or 1 hour long training session on an insert day always makes a difference, doesn't it? No, it's got to be something that's drip-fed. Continuously raising awareness. I find a particular target, change it. So, talk about there about how to manage a data breach. One of the things that we'll be doing over the next few weeks is saying to folk, what are you doing over the summer holidays? Okay, everyone's happy that we're getting through Whitsun, final sprint up until the end of term. Okay, what happens during the summer holidays? Who here has got a policy in place to manage a breach during the summer? No hands going up. You have?
Well, we work.
We work. Okay. Well,
it's a standard policy for us.
Okay. Does everybody work during the summer holidays? No, not everybody does.
That's your biggest thing.
Okay. Not everybody works during summer holidays. If you look at all those primary schools that buy in IT services, they may not know they've had a breach. What happens if a member of staff loses their laptop? An unencrypted laptop. Okay, who do they speak to? Can they get through reception, which is on the answering phone? No, they can't. They can't get in touch with anyone. They'll email in to the network manager and help, I've lost my laptop. The network manager's not looking at emails from staff because, oh God, I'm not dealing with staff over the summer. I've got work to do. Okay? So, who do they speak to? Why not? If you've got a policy, or please make a policy. If you've got a policy, then get folk together. It's even if it's just at the end of an evening or whatever. So we've said, have a breach meet, not a beach meet, not a teach meet, a breach meet. Just tell people, come along, we'll tell you what to do. There's lots of other things that go on at the end of the year, beginning of the next year. So the toolkit for schools has just come out. The Academies one is still being worked on, but actually this will fill in most of the stuff for you. The Academies one should be out during the summer holidays towards September time. So more information will end up being shared around about that when it's available. But this, absolutely fantastic. This is just a section of the retention schedule that you in a school would have to say, these are the things that we need to do housekeeping on at the end of summer, as the old students leave, as the old staff leave, and new ones come in. So think about the stuff you need to cover during the summer. How will you manage a subject access request? How will you manage a breach? Who will be doing the housekeeping? these are all the things that are unlikely to have been thought about last year. So this is your opportunity to do it this year. Okay? It won't be perfect, and next year you'll do it even better. It's continuous improvement. We've also got the other thing of where, how many people here had all of their policies scrapped and rewritten? No one. Because most of the school, one person had all their policies. Okay? Now, we're just going to play a little bit of, can you spot anything that might be something you have? Or if you see something you see something that's not on there, feel free to shout it out. Now, some of those things will be combined together. Some of those things might not actually be individual policies, they might actually be built within systems. Okay. A lot of these are operational. A lot of these might even have had some feed into through a DPIA, because if you're doing one around safeguarding, take net support and the information that they collect. Brilliant, but how long do you keep it for? Who's made that decision? Have you got record of that decision? Where's it written down? Where's the policy? When is that information deleted? Is it in your retention schedule? So you can see it's not one thing, it's actually several things joined together. This is just a starter for 10. Can anybody think of a policy that they've got that might be impacted that isn't up on there? There are some. There are. No?
What about cloud software?
Cloud software. So what about cloud software?
It's about selecting and choosing the guidance and basically as per the DPIA, insurance policy there to make sure that's applied as soon as they start talking about.
Okay, so basically it's specific information around doing the DPIAs around cloud services. DPIA process. It doesn't matter whether it's cloud, whether it's in-house, should still be the same process. Okay, hands up. Last time, I promise you it will be the last time. Okay, everyone with their hands up, please. Everyone, please. Who in their school knows where the school's risk register is? Keep your hands up if you do. Who in their school has got anything related to security, data protection and privacy within their risk register? Okay. Who keeps a separate risk register for anything to do with security and privacy and data protection risks? Because that is actually a model. As long as you've got one, and as long as you've got a risk management policy, you know how it all works, it is possible to keep two separate ones. As long as the right people, so the governors or board of trustees, are aware of what's going on. So, there's a couple of things to think about. I'll see if I can get this document, well actually it'll be on the slide so you'll be able to see this as well anyway. Okay? So, it is really important that when we were talking about being replaceable, you make sure that all the policies are in place. You've got standards way of working and things like that. So, it's important to have a look at these. Never mind about GDPR. Okay. So, we've covered that not a lot's changed. It's actually just getting better. It's about being more informed. It's about giving more information. It's about using your audits to gather evidence. That's not just around the operational side of things, though that is a really important thing to do. It's also about governance, about leadership, it's about the decisions schools are making. It's about whether they review risks and review their processes. So there's still lots to do. It's a case of it's going to be 2, 3, maybe 4 years before schools can say they've really got it embedded in. It's going to take a bit of time. And there's going to be a drip feed of case law that comes out, which will affect how we think about certain things. Because some things are still unclear. And that's just one of the things that we've got to work with. Right, that is a very whistle-stop tour. I could speak about this for ages. As people know, if I want to speak about something, I will speak for ages. Thank you very much for the audience participation bit. I know it's a bit of a pain for people. Look at it this way. It's better than when Ray Fleming used to do these sorts of things. Ray Fleming, Microsoft now in Australia, he used to make people stand up for him. I'm not that cruel. Right, we do still have some time.
15 minutes.
15 minutes, brilliant, I'm within time this time. Yes, it's the first time I've been within time with any of my presentations. You used to just give me...
started early.
Yeah, there is that. You used to only give me 30 minutes and I still used to take 45, but...
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Right.
did that on purpose.
Okay. This is a time for Q&A, okay? It's one of those things that I might not be able to always give you, answers. Some of those answers will be, it depends. But if you've got something, or, scenarios, let's call them, so we're not thinking of something that specifically happened within your school, just give me scenarios, because this is being videoed, obviously. And away you go.
It's not just scenarios as such. If you're making fun of the consent thing, my school relies on consent for everything and they've got GDPR. What is wrong with that? Why is it?
Right, okay, let's...
It's a junior school.
It's a maintained school, it's a state school.
It's a MAT school now.
It's with it, it's okay, so it's still a state school. Okay, let's go all the way back. Sorry, apologise, where are we? There, okay. Right. If any of these are not true, it is not consent, in which case you do not have a lawful basis for processing that data. That, first and foremost, is the thing that I would say. There is no way you can use consent where anything is part of a statutory return. It's statutory. Either you say it's a legal obligation or it's a public task.
This is sort of consent for trips.
So, consent for trips.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or someone's coming to the school,
Okay, so you're not using consent for everything. I breathe a sigh of relief. I really do.
They're not being overarching consent, no, because I know that doesn't work.
Yeah, so one of the things that sometimes you'll find is that the term consent is used for multiple things. It's used in the plain English sense of giving someone permission just to get on and do something, but it's also used in the legal sense as in it's a lawful basis to allow data to be processed. An example would be a trip. Within an LA school, a trip is recognised as an educational activity if it's tied in within the curriculum. And so consent isn't required, or permission isn't required to go on that trip. It's usually that information is provided. In the same way, that consent isn't used to process the data. However, in academies, that guidance isn't there because that guidance was purely aimed at maintained schools. So academies have to think about, okay, do we have a lawful basis for processing data around this, and if so, what is it? If it's an educational trip and they can justify, because as a maintained school, they did it that way, as an academy, actually, we still think we can do it that way. That's a perfectly sensible decision for them to take, because there is precedent there. They can go, right, that's an educational activity, we're still going to process the data as if it was a public task, because it is a public task. When we're looking at other things such as extracurricular activities, so if the trip was a skiing trip, that's extracurricular, that's not tied in with the curriculum. It'd be difficult to tie in with the pastoral side of things. So at that point you're saying, okay, it's not just the permission to attend, to go, and all the other bits and pieces. We need consent to use the data, to share that data with travel agencies and all the other bits and pieces that are going to work with it. And at that point it becomes specific. So your consent form says, on this trip, the following data will be shared with the following people. Please give your consent. So that's an example of consent in the truest possible sense. We do also see examples of companies that swear blind that schools have to show them evidence that parents have given consent to use that particular educational product. Which is scary. Scary on two reasons. Firstly, the lawful basis is wrong. Yeah. Well,
if they're going on a trip, the coach company requires to see evidence that they've given consent.
Sometimes that's not to do with data, that's to do with that the children are allowed to actually physically go on and other bits and pieces. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It's one of those ones of where if the school, as the data controller says, we are not processing data based on consent, in that case the coach company can't force you to go and get it. Because if they're forcing you to get consent, it's not freely given, is it? So in that case it fails on that first point. Okay? But we do have companies out there, educational companies, that are saying, no, we need to say consent. They're making that decision. If they make the decision, and they're making decisions about how things are being processed and what's being processed, that makes them the data controller, not the school. There are some companies that swear blind that the school isn't even a joint data controller, they're a data processor. And those are the very difficult ones to turn around and say no to, because they're going, no, you have to do it this way. And they're the ones that you do have to go back to and push to, and you have to turn around and say, we are using this as part of our curriculum delivery. It's not based on consent. Children don't have a choice about whether they use this tool or not. It's not down to them to make that decision. And yes, I have turned around and said to a couple of schools, move away from that company. And, you know, it's a case of, yeah, if they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. You know, as a DPO, I'm saying, that's the advice I'm giving you. You can overrule me, but that's the advice I'm giving you. Find me another reason within law, within any guidance that you've had that said that you can do it. Ask the company to give you their legal advice as well, a copy of it, because they should do. If they don't, that's another reason why you go, actually no, they won't give us the information that we need. So consent, that's why I say consent for me is a is a frustrating one, because there are some schools that are happy to use consent for educational tools, and it's not valid. Okay, if it's not something that can be withdrawn, it means that something isn't being freely given either. Okay. Next question. Sorry, I can't quite hear you. They're a rowdy bunch next door, sorry.
Who should be the DPO? Who should be the DPO in the school, given every senior member of staff is conflicted?
If there's a conflict, you go outside. There is a workable model, and this is one that we've actually been having some discussions with the key around, because they're finding that this is coming up, and they've been asking governors as well. It is possible for a governor to be DPO. The difficulty is that boundary between strategic and operational. If there are data protection leads within the school who will do all the work and all the other bits and pieces, and the DPO there is dealing with the strategic advice, the hand-holding, the making sure people are doing the right things. A bit like a safeguarding lead, governor, to be honest. Then that's a possible working model, but you've got to be really careful about that, because governors shouldn't stray into operational. And I mean, I can't be DPO of my schools. I'm a governor of Federation of 2 infant schools. Because of pecuniary interests, I can't be DPO, even though I'd like to be. But in other schools, it may be possible. But the other side of things is making sure the DPO's got the right level of knowledge and experience. We do see people with the title of DPO within the school, and realistically they're not. They then call on other services, so they may buy in a service for local authority, from a DPO service provider such as ourselves, and they'll go, right, you know, we need your advice and guidance. Realistically, although they may hold the title of the DPO, they're not, they're just the data protection lead. They're actually drawing on advice from somebody else. It may be that, let's face it, in this day and age, people have taken on the role of DPO because it's meant that they've been able to keep their job at a particular level within the admin staff. As all of the cuts are happening, that is one of the things that's happening. They've taken on some additional roles, which means that their job isn't being shrunk down a little bit, and we have to face that reality. The thing that we would say is, if your school doesn't have somebody with the right experience or knowledge, go out and find somebody. There's lots of folk out there. I mean, we, you know, as well as the stuff that we do, we work with another 7 or 8 DPO service providers. And there's lots more. There are some really good folk out there. So there shouldn't be an excuse of, we don't know who to go to. There are folk out there. One of the things that I'd always say is, if there's a conflict, then that member of staff should register that as a risk. The governing body should be aware of that, or the Board of Trustees should be aware of that, and they should decide whether it's acceptable or not. Part of that is the justification about what they're doing. And if something does go wrong, or if there's a specific conflict of interest in a particular area, and that person has to go, okay, I've got a hold of my hands. I can't deal with this specific issue because it's too close to home. I need somebody to help me, or somebody else to pull in and deal with this particular bit. That might be what they have to do. I wish there was you have to do this. You know, there is guidance on what a DPO should be, what their role should be, what their activities should be. But we all are facing the reality in schools, short of cash, they're trying to make do. Ultimately, they're going to have to sort it out. It might not be now, it might be next year, it might be the year after. They will have to sort it out. It's only going to take a few, you know, bad cases for something to go wrong in investigations. I mean, one of the things that when ICO have gone in and done their advisory visits, if there have been conflicts of interest, they've been quite clear there's a conflict of interest, and they will tell you there's a conflict of interest here, and they will expect you to do something about it. They will also talk about KPIs, so they will want you to say, okay, how far along are you with your journey? And they will expect the DPO to be able to know, understand it, and they'll be able to explain it. So having the right DPO is a really cool thing within the school. Okay, I think there's time for one more. One more.
So Tony, just
Go on.
to chip in again from a large company trust perspective, do you recommend people have a look at the audits of the MATs by the ICO and have a look at some of the findings of those, because they'll start trickling down to small organisations. Big work has been done, as it's now going across small units, and that will trickle down to schools. So if they're out there on the ICO's site, have a look and see what they think of what we've been put up for. Because it is a long-term goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's stuff that's on the ICO site about advisory visits. And if you get offered a chance to have an advisory visit, it's an advisory visit. It's a really good process to go through. For those of you who've gone through anything like Cyber Essentials or any other form of security or information audit, it's a really good thing to do. The larger organisations have had some very specific targets, and the only problem I've got with the ICO reports into schools is they use the same format and the same language that they do for every single sector, and they don't take into account schools, or they understand, sometimes they don't understand school governance. So BSA today have got a meeting with Ofsted, and we know that for years Ofsted have turned around and gone, we don't do anything with data protection and privacy. I mean, 10 years ago, after the Bector advice came out, they did eventually turn around and say, well, actually, if somebody's had a sanction, so an undertaking, we would take it that they are failing with regards to the safeguarding. That would be a 4, which would be a 4 overall. They dialed that down, they watered it down up until 2013. They said, we're not experts, we're not going to touch this. But happily, they will happily make judgments or comments on health and safety issues. So it's a case of, oh well, ICO, they do the regulation. Well, HSE do the other stuff, health and safety, you know. So we've got questions in front of Ofsted at the moment, and BISA are going to be going through those to say, within leadership and management, in the inadequate grading description, you talk about failure to do your legal duties. If somebody's had to sign an undertaking, that is a failure to do, you know, the legal duties. It can't be more black and white than that. So, you know, we'll wait to see what Ofsted come back and say about that. But, you know, as we always say, we'll share it around as soon as we have an answer ourselves. Thank you very much for that. Okay, and I think that's it for me.
One more thing. Kim Bout says hello to you. And
hello to Jason Isaac as well.
Mark Graham says he should be, you've got a bit of a Paul Hollywood voice, so you should be handing out a Star Baker to someone.
I wouldn't be handing out Star Baker, but just be eating all the cakes, as you can see. I mean, it's one of those things, and I'm hoping this has been filmed in widescreen compared to what it looked like 2 years ago. I have, I've become more comfortable in my age. What can I say? Thank you very much. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for asking the questions. I will be around throughout the day. If you do have any queries, just give us a shout, tap me on the shoulder, whatever. Thank you very much.